Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, November 4th public session of the Halton District School Board. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to note regrets from Trustee Oliver, and everyone else is present. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Trustee Grabent, seconded by Trustee Pappen. All those in favor? And Trustee Danielle is out of the room, so. Thank you, that passes unanimously. May I remind everyone to please turn off anything that may make noise and cell phones. Yes, Director Miller, and, or anything else. And I'd like to remind everybody we're also being video voice recorded and streaming on the web at this moment. Yes, you wave to the family, your friends. Do we have any declarations of possible conflict of interest tonight? Seeing none, I would like to recognize that we acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the First Peoples, which is something that we want to acknowledge as a board. All right, so we're up to now delegations. We have none tonight, so we'll move on to our minutes of the October 21st board meeting. Do I have a mover to approve? Trustee Reynolds, seconded by Vice Chair Collard. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. I know we did have business transacted in private session. Vice Chair Collard.
So we have two items. The first item is regarding negotiations, report 15140, and I so move.
All right, is there any discussion? It was seconded by Trustee Gray. Seeing none, I have to find it on the. It's not on here. Just, no, it's board recognition. Just a minute, we have to wait for the technology to be added. Anybody want to play the Jeopardy music? I don't think that plays music. We do have singers in the room, though. Okay.
We've got good singers, and we've got bad singers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got lots of singers in the room. Some of them you don't want to hear. There you go. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so negotiations? Yeah. Okay. So all those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. There's one more item, I
Yes,
believe.
there's one more item regarding property matters, item 15139, and I so move.
Do I have a seconder? Trustee Gray. Any discussion? Seeing none, All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Is that the end of the private session? Thank you. We're now up to the order paper, and we thought it would be a good practice tonight to review some of the items on the order paper. And I'd also like to call your attention to the fact that one item did get dropped accidentally and will be re-put onto it. It was, just a minute, I'm opening it. It was motion 14-0142. Be it resolved, the director directs staff to conduct a review of the supervision of students who have high safety risks beginning September 2014, and that the review cover any and all parts of the legal school day, including getting to class, nutrition breaks, recess, etc., and that the recess include the process for training staff, the supervision levels for students, and if students' safety needs are being appropriately addressed, and that SEAC members be invited to participate in this review. As I said, it was accidentally dropped from the order paper in the spring, and Superintendent Zonneveld, did you want to speak to it?
So this motion originated originally at SEAC and then was supported at the board table. So this is work that we've been planning to engage in. The challenge has been, as you're aware of, that with the sanctions since the springtime, really important voices that we need in the process of this review are principals, certs, teachers of self-contained classes such as life skills and our center programs, those kinds of staff. So we haven't moved too far with this review because of that, but obviously we hope to get moving soon with the lifting of those sanctions. But it's important that it be on the order paper.
Thank you. So as I said, we were going to do a review. Director Miller, did you want to walk through them, or did anybody want to highlight any that they were concerned about or interested in?
Rather than walk through them, I thought that we would have, if trustees had identified ones, the staff has been prepared to address them. There are a couple specific ones we want to address, and we'll get to those. But I thought I'd leave it to trustees to ask questions, and if they don't ask questions about the specific ones, then we would come back to those.
Thank you. So Trustee Harvey-Hope.
Thank you. I have one comment and then one query. The one about the, where was it? Just saw it. The school-generated funds policy work has not been forgotten. Again, it's one of those things where other things took over.
Can you mention the motion so we can?
Yeah, 120204. So that's one of the ones that is in motion, but with some of the work that was happening at Audit Committee and other places and PB&G generally, it hasn't seen the light of day yet, but it is definitely rising on the list of things that I'm going to be doing. We do have a subcommittee now that's been formed in PB&G to deal with this. The question I had was about the graying of 150139 Part 3. I find it really disconcerting when we gray out one section and leave the other two, although it is the last piece in this case. But seeing as how we haven't really heard back from the ministry about our request, we may have sent the letter, but we haven't heard it back. I wondered whether or not it would be appropriate to just leave that section intact. And also potentially leave 150172 about the English-French Program Viability Committee process on for just a little longer, in that it's a way to highlight the fact that we have a process, and but I mean, that's debatable, but just for, you know, we seem sometimes eager to drop things off when, because I'm not too sure anybody would kind of know where to go look otherwise, kind of thing.
Through you, Chair Amos, to Trustee Harvey Hope. I see your point. We have done the correspondence. You're right. We have not heard back. We do know that the provincial government is working on this, but they have not specifically responded back to us. And this was, by the letter of the law, this should be great, but I get your point. It makes, because we have done the correspondence, but we haven't heard back. So I'm comfortable with it remaining on the order paper until we do get something back, and or perhaps remain on the order paper but gray, because what I want to do is indicate that we have done at least that part. Is that all right?
The second piece was the 172.
I think it's, sorry, through you, Chair Amos, to Trustee Harvey Hope. I think it's not dissimilar from the one above. I'm comfortable with it staying on there, though, but I would like it to remain gray. All right?
Thank you, Vice Chair Collard.
That's fine. Superintendent or Director Miller just said what I was going to suggest, so that's fine.
Trustee Graves.
Same. I'm wondering actually if 0172 is something that we've done, and the result of which is 0173. And so could we remove 172, and what remains is 173, which is the process that we're undertaking right now.
Which is why I believe we grade it, because that's what our thinking was as well.
Could I, well, except it's still on her.
Trustee Harvey Hope.
Perhaps if we could refer to the report number 15114 inside 0173, somehow even in brackets or something, so somebody could go find. We adopted the process, but we forgot to leave in the motion what the process was or where to find it.
I understand what you're saying, Trustee Graves, and I don't disagree, but I think for public consumption, it does no harm to leave on 7.2, as it demonstrates that we are going into that consultation process. By taking off, some may read that, given the political nature of this particular process, some may read that as we've completed the consultation process, and I certainly don't want that perception out there. So if trustees are comfortable, I'd prefer to leave it on and have it grayed, so, and then take it off once we're done. Is that all right?
Thank you. Have trustees had a chance to look at the other items on the order paper to make sure that we're all comfortable with the ones that have been left? Oh, Director Miller.
As I said, I preferred for you to go through it, and if you had questions, we'd deal with those. But there were two that we specifically want to point out. Superintendent Zonnefeld will talk about M130073 on page 7 around assessment of gifted, and well, we'll do it one at a time. So,
Superintendent Zonnefeld?
Through the chair to trustees, with regard to this motion, this again is a review emanating from SEAC that we've been ready to move on, and our challenges again have been in the involvement of staff. So we're certainly ready to move ahead with this. Timing wise, our intent was to be bringing this forward sooner than later, but we're struggling with some of the delays around that. So there will be some delay there. Can I go then to the, okay, sure.
And to all trustees, Superintendent Zonnefeld will talk about M150059 on page 9. This one is a little more, because this is a wee bit more prescriptive, because it actually has a date, February 2016. And Superintendent Zonneveld will outline the reasons why that date probably has to be amended or changed.
Through the chair to trustees, the original timing of February was the intent is that we could have this review done and the report brought forward in time to be impactful for this coming year's EA allocation process. And when you look at the extent of the review there, the wording, that's certainly once again involves input from staff, which we've been unable to gather over these last number of months. So we're going to get going on this right away. As you know, with the sanctions only being lifted this week, we have to assess how quickly and what our action will look like. As you know, we're cautious around how much we're asking of schools and our ability to draw upon administrators because we currently still have a number of sanctions and things in place with other employee groups. So we'll have to sort of assess how quickly we can move with this. So I guess what I'm saying is that I don't think we're going to be able to get this done for this year's EA allocation process to do this right, which is, I know, the wishes of SEAC and of trustees that we do this well. So the timing, unfortunately, won't be in time for this year, but we will still move ahead with this review.
Well, and thank you for that explanation. I think we all understand that the sanctions have put a great strain on staff and the ability to be able to do a lot of the things that we maybe had thought would be able to be done. And I believe that we all understand and will, we understand that you're also going to try and get the process done as soon as you can, but it unfortunately won't be the same kind of timelines as we had originally asked for.
Again, to all trustees, just to add a couple of comments to Superintendent Zonneveld. As we start to come out of sanctions, particularly with the elementary, and well, not particularly, in all areas, elementary and secondary, and this, I think, will be consistent around the province, it is not our intent to start catching up on all the things we've been unable to do in the last 3 months. We think it's very important, and this is unrelated to the order paper, but it's related to what Superintendent Zonneveld was talking about. We think it's very important that schools be given some time to acclimatize themselves back and reestablish relationships and rebuild the cultures if they need rebuilding. But people are tired and worn out, and I think we need to give them some time to do that. So in addition to what Superintendent Zonneveld said, we will be moving slowly on some of these things and not pulling our staffs out of the schools as frequently as we would have, essentially pausing and slowly eking back into the many things that we have to do. So that's also related to what Superintendent Zonneveld was talking about. So around the order paper, I thank you for your indulgence with that. I think we probably should do that every so often. It's good for us as staff as well, because it refocuses on some of the things that we need to be working on, because as you can imagine, everybody gets pretty busy. So thank you, and if you have any further questions about the order paper, the staff is prepared to answer those.
Thank you. Vice Chair Collard.
Yes, with regard to the delay on the special education reviews and reports that are coming to the board, Superintendent Zonneveld did discuss this with SEAC last night. They are aware of the delay, and while they're disappointed, they're also very understanding.
Thank you. Trustee Harvey-Hope.
While we're on the theme of when something should be on and off, pending reports M150043 refers to a report that we all have. It should be gray, but should maybe stay on, seeing as how there may be follow-up or something along those lines. But the report was definitely presented to us in September, actually, I believe. But so maybe the date could be changed on the right-hand column. But that's one of those ones where the report is out there. It has been done. It's not like it's pending, but it may be changed, updated, amended, I don't know what you want to call it, so maybe it could stay on, but gray.
Director Miller,
And then,
Sorry?
go ahead.
Oh, through Chair Amos to Trustee Harvey Hope. Actually, we did bring the report in June 2015. It was a consultation report that we brought in September. But the work of the PVC is not done. To the letter of the law, I agree with you. I think you're entirely correct. But I certainly don't want to give the impression that the Program Viability Committee has disbanded. So perhaps it is leaving it on and draining it just to demonstrate that it hasn't been taken off, because the final the Program Viability Committee will be intimately involved in looking what comes back from the community consultation process. So I hope that's in agreement with.
the other one I was looking for was we waived the rules on October 21st to motion M150174 about the policy development and review policy being posted, similar to one of the other ones, and it is sitting posted on the website, but the motion to post it on the website is not on the order paper. So I think it's been missed. I am looking in the minutes right now from October the 7th, and so that's in the October 21st agenda package. Okay. Part of the problem with that is if it doesn't stay on the order paper, we forget to bring it back, but
I'm not sure we'll forget to bring it back, because part of the process is that it is put on for a certain amount of time, then it's to return to the board, right? I'm not sure. You're right, it hasn't come back yet.
and it was on last agenda package saying it was an active item, even though like it just sort of disappears when we waive the rules. It sort of is on.
Was it?
It was on October 7th saying it was going to be action October 21st. It disappears off the 21st agenda package, and it's.
Apparently, it never was on the order paper, so it was an oversight. So thank you for bringing that up. Is there any other comments or questions around the order paper tonight? Thank you very much to all trustees for this review, because I think it keeps everything fresh in our minds of some of the work that is ongoing at the board. Our next item, we have no action items tonight, so we will go to our favorite people, the student trustee reports. Trustees Schneider and Sahai.
Okay, hello everyone. So last Tuesday we had a Senate meeting. It was our second Senate meeting of the year. I'll just talk about the discussions that went on, and Jovan will talk about the initiative that we're doing. So discussions that we went through with the elementary. This was a meeting where we had separated elementary and secondary for some bits of it and then joint for some other bits. So then you got isolated conversations with elementary and secondary. And we decided to discuss the implementation of the new phys ed and health curriculum with the elementary school students and see, we know what curriculum is now, but the reality of the students. And we saw a lot of inconsistencies across the board in elementary schools for the students and what they want to learn and what they are learning and the ways that it's delivered. So we have that all written up and possibly could submit it to the board to look at. Different trustees, we can email that around. It was very, very interesting to hear what the elementary school students had to say. And a lot of it was actually revolved around the depth of mental health, like education that they get. Some schools go really in depth, and other schools just brush over it. So that was very interesting to hear. With the secondary schools, We talked about LGBTQ issues in schools. And then after the discussion wasn't as active, so I changed the discussion to flipped classrooms and see flipped classrooms and see the implementation and impact that they've had. And a lot of the feedback was actually negative towards flipped classrooms. So that's when they do the readings at home and then do homework and questions in class, or readings or watching videos and such. And that wasn't identified as a problem with the idea itself, but more the implementation. So more work given at home. If the work is overwhelming to do at home, then the students won't do it, and then in class is wasted. So, and some students didn't find it effective at all. So there was also information about that we could circulate. I'll just pass it to Jovan to talk about our initiative.
So last meeting we didn't touch upon our initiative too much. It was more so discussion based last meeting. But now with sanctions kind of easing up, we're gonna start looking at communicating with other people on the board about our student voice report and making sure that goes into action this year. Like Sophie said, I have some of the notes that the students brought up from those discussions. They're really good notes because, like Sophie said, some teachers don't really like to dissect too much into the topic. So it was good to see like the scope from across the board. I think that's it. Quite a short report, not too much.
We also, to brainstorm the questions for our student voice report that day that we're holding, to gather all the information from the students, we have to brainstorm questions that we're going to ask, for roundtable discussions. So we did that by, I put like 3 leading questions, kind of generalized about education, what do you like what should be changed, and students were put into smaller groups and they all brainstormed together, and then when they had an idea they wrote it down on a sticky note and then they just put it up at the front right there, and we have a picture of all the sticky notes up. We can probably circulate that too, but it's just all the ideas about education, and next meeting we're looking to consolidate that into questions we can ask and topics we can focus on. So there's a lot of really good ones. The groups really got passionate. Our involvement in Senate this year is amazing. Like the students are very into talking about education, which is very cool to see. So that's about it. We also brainstormed some names for the award, which we will pass on. Yeah, so thank you.
Any comments or questions for our student trustees tonight? Vice Chair Collins.
I personally would really appreciate receiving a copy of the notes that you took, especially regarding the health and phys ed curriculum, but also about the flipped classroom, because it needs to be working for the students. They're the recipient of the education, so they need to be feeling like it's working for them, and so I would really appreciate receiving that. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I do have one. So you said that you were asking questions regarding the flipped classroom. Now, had all students actually experienced it, or were some just making assumptions?
So this was just for our secondary students, and it was majority who experienced flipped classrooms. We took a poll, like hands up, to see how many, and there were only like 1 or 2 that hadn't experienced it. Yeah, and there were also some assumptions, considering some experienced it in different subjects than others. But we also had clarifications from the staff members that were here to give a little insight and background on flipped classrooms and the original intentions and what's supposed to happen, just so that the bias is reduced. Yeah.
Well, thank you, because I'm happy to hear that piece, because sometimes I'm concerned that people make decisions about things they're actually only know a little bit about. So, thank you. If you could please circulate all that information to trustees, that would be wonderful. It sounds like some good discussion, and it would be interesting for us to see what was being discussed. Thank you for your report tonight. We're now up to our information items. Do we have any notices of motion tonight? Seeing none, we'll go up to action items for our November 18th board meeting. Our board recognition policy, trustees L. Harrison, Reynolds, and Gray, report 15142 on page 11 of your board package. And I'm not sure which one of you wants to speak to this. Are you the spokesperson? Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're a team, certainly the three of us and beyond. The recognition committee has been before this board, before PB&G, and the communications committee a number of times, as well consultation beyond through our equity team to SEAC with our student trustees, and for that I think that we've grown a really strong concept, and that concept has then translated into hopefully what people will see as a strong policy. I want to thank PB&G for the lengthy discussion we were able to have at the last meeting to get to this point. And as we talked about putting this report together, Trustee Reynolds, I believe, had the moment where she thought, this is really about me to we and embodying that concept in this program. So we're recognizing and thanking people who are raising our students up in an exemplary way, demonstrated by caring, initiative, innovation, creativity, inspiring others, and again, supporting students and contributing to their achievement. So on all of that basis, the draft policy has been put together and is now before the group for your consideration to post that for consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to thank everyone involved with this. We really, when we talked about creating a recognition policy to recognize people in the system and beyond, it was just an idea, and it's now come to fruition, and a lot of hard work has been put into it. But I'd like to thank the three ladies who helped guide it through the process, because you've done a lot of work, as well as some of the staff members. And so thank you to everyone involved, and I think this is exciting, that we're going to be able to do some recognition within the system and beyond. Is there a will to waive the rules to get this posted sooner than later? I see a motion by Trustee Gerbens, seconded by Vice Chair Collard. Is there any discussion on waiving the rules? Seeing none. All those in favor of waiving the rules for this topic tonight? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. So I will read the motion. Be it resolved, the Halton District School Board's recognition policy, as appended to report 15142, be posted on the board's website for public input for a period of not less than 25 days, and that the policy and any input returned to the board for consideration in December 2015. Moved by Trustee L. Harrison, seconded by, can we have two seconders? Trustee Gray and Trustee Reynolds. Any discussion on the motion? Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, I would be remiss if I didn't also mention, I'm not sure if I did before, but staff contribution. And we certainly worked closely to fine-tune and figure out how we were going to operationalize it. And one of the things that was important, I think, to everyone we've spoken to is that we really maintain the spirit of continuous improvement. So hopefully it'll be great right out of the blocks, but I'm sure we're going to learn some things as we move through year one. And hopefully, you know, as we do our annual evaluation, we'll make it an even stronger program. So thanks to staff for that as well.
Thank you. Vice Chair Collard.
Yes, as I recall from our last meeting when we put something up for 25 days, it's also supposed to span 3 meetings. And traditionally in December, we only have 1 meeting, although in the last 5 years, we've had 2. So if there's not a second meeting in December, it might not come back in December. It might come back in January. Now, we will probably have 2 in December, but I just wanted to make that point because if it doesn't, then it wouldn't come back till January.
Okay, trustees are understanding that it needs to be spanning that 3 board meetings. Thank you, Vice Chair Collard. Trustee Gray.
Through the chair, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank really the leadership of Tracy L. Harrison. Trustee L. Harrison has spent great amounts of time to bring this forward. And I think in reflection of our process in bringing this all the way through to where it is right now, and in the many different writings stages of getting it to this point, I'm reminded of the saying, sometimes it pays off to go slow to go fast. And in our learning curve, as some of us as a new board on the new to this board of trustees, I think that we've all learned a great deal in our processing of really how a motion is brought forward, and then all of the background work and all of the bylaws and the procedures and all the rest of it that has to be polished up and discussed, and then the numerous committees already mentioned by Trustee L. Harrison that had to review this document before we could really be on solid ground in knowing that this is something that's good for our board. So once again, thank you to colleague Trustee L. Harrison for her leadership on this. And I look forward to our first ever awarding of these awards, hopefully sooner rather than later, January if it must be.
Thank you. Any other speakers to this motion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Thank you. That passes unanimously. So that will be posted tomorrow. Okay, so we're now up to our information items, which is our EQAO report. Superintendent Bogue. Nicole Jarvis. And I did our black belts together. Oh, cool. You did a black belt? Yes. Also, welcome Nicole Jarvis and Phil Davidson. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And just to do a more formal introduction, Nicole is our instructional program leader for mathematics, and Phil is our instructional program leader for literacy. Notice how they've just surrounded me. This is great. We're here to talk about the EQAO results from last year. We're going to try to move through the slides fairly quickly. Trustees have seen a number of these slides before, so we'll move through those. If there are questions, of course, we can revisit a slide at the end if you wish. Nicole and Phil are going to provide a little bit of context around what we're doing to address some of the results that we've got, because they're our experts and they're working with schools. EQAO provides a whole host of information for us, and I won't go through all the bits and pieces, but it tells us how our kids are doing. We can look at subpopulations, we can look at cohorts of students over time, and we can look at students' perceptions of their learning. They fill out a survey when they do EQAO, so it tells us how they're feeling about mathematics, for example, and whether they feel that they're good at math, those kinds of things. we use the information at the system level and at the school level. It helps us guide our work in terms of how do we help our students. So areas that we determine are areas of need, we introduce strategies, and where teachers require some additional support, we look at staff development plans for our teachers to address those needs. So that's happening at the big system level in terms of supporting the multi-year plan and the board improvement plan. And of course, it's happening at the school level and ultimately in the classroom as well. This is a summary of our results. You'll see a lot of NAs up there due to the job action last year. Boards didn't participate in certain assessments, and so provincial data is not available. Our board data is not available for grade 3 and 6 as well. And we've talked about that one before. So we'll dig into the math data here. Just a note around our results over time, and we're the blue line up on the graph. It shows our grade 9 academic math results over 5 years. A couple of comments just on that. That's our board level data, and I know our school level data was released last week or a couple weeks ago, and so schools therefore are scattered around that line, some above and some below. We look at board level data. School data varies, is a little bit more variable because of the smaller size of the cohort. So in terms of our plan as a board, we're looking at the big system level data. The other thing I just want to comment on is that our data in grade 9 math or on the OSSLT is a snapshot. The previous snapshot was in grade 6. So when we look at our success on these two particular assessments, we need to also be thinking about the good work that's happening in grade 7 and 8. And so if there are questions later on, I know Superintendent Dyson is happy to talk about what's happening in grade 7 and 8 as well that has contributed to our data. So that's our academic data, very strong. Our applied data, not as strong. It's a provincial concern for sure. We're above the province, fairly level data, an area for us to certainly do some work on. We talked about the percentage of students in the academic and applied programs. Again, provincially, we're seeing more kids headed to academic. We see a slight incline. That's the dark blue is the province. Our board data is even more substantially weighted in the academic stream in mathematics and on the increase. This is our applied cohort. So again, we see we're decreasing and we have a much smaller proportion than provincially. We show those two slides because if we combine the results and we look at our progress over time in terms of kids meeting that expected benchmark, we're pretty level, but we're very high, significantly high, around 85%, about 10 points higher than the province. So that's 85% of our kids meeting the provincial standard in their program of choice. So that's pretty good news for us. We can look at some subgroups as well. Now this slide's a little bit unique in that it's got 5 different lines on there, but it's really hard to see, so I apologize for that. There is a red line there. You have to imagine it. It's around the 90% line for academic math. That's all kids, and it runs and it lays right underneath the green line and the blue line. The good news here is if we look at some subgroups, so the boys are blue and the girls are green, they're laying basically right on top of the red line, which is all students. And that's good news because that means we haven't got a significant achievement gap. And in fact, there's no gap at all between boys and girls. They're doing equally well, and that's good news. The black line is our English language learners, again, basically lying right on top of our line for all students, and that's good news, meaning we haven't got an achievement gap for those students as well. Special education is below, and so there is an achievement gap there in an area of need for us to continue to work on our students with special education needs. Just to put in context the size of those groups as well, the numbers on the right-hand side indicate the size of those cohorts. And so you can see in the academic stream, our special ed population is 276 out of about 3,250 students. So it's pretty small, and same with the English language learners. This is what it looks like in our applied. So the lines have spread out. There's a little bit more spread here. The red line again represents all students. This cohort, remember, is a pretty small group compared to academic. It's only 600 kids. And so we expect to see more variability in a smaller size cohort. We see that the boys are actually outperforming the girls the last few years, which is kind of interesting. So we've got a bit of an achievement gap, and there's a question for us to look at then. Why are boys being more successful in the applied program than the girls? Our students with special education needs are just below our line for all students, so that's good news. And English language learners are lagging a little bit behind, but not significantly. So it gives you a sense of that applied group and how the subgroups are performing. I'll just spend a little bit of time on this slide to make sure this one is clear. This is our cohort tracking data. And this pie graph represents the kids that we have data for grade 6 and grade 9. And if you notice in the bottom left-hand corner, that total number of 2898, it's a little bit smaller than our grade 9 cohort this year. That means that we're only looking at kids that we have data for both grade 6 and 9. So kids that left the system are not included. A student that came to us in grade 8 from Edmonton, for example, there's no grade 6 data. That student would not be included. There's 4 possible outcomes that we look at in this particular analysis. So from grade 6 to 9, we've got kids that hit the mark in grade 6 and maintain the standard in grade 9. That's the light blue. So that's good news in grade 6, good news in grade 9. We've got students that were below standard in grade 6 but hit the mark in grade 9. That's good news. That's the dark blue. So blue is good. And then we've got students that either never met the standard in grade 6 and in grade 9, that's the green, or they dropped from grade 6. They hit the standard in grade 6 and then dropped, and that's the turquoise. So green and turquoise not so good, the blue is good. We sometimes look at these graphs as value added or value subtracted. If we look at just the kids that changed from grade 6 to 9, we've got 15% that rose to standard, 3% that dropped. So we can think about this as a 12% value added. So that's our academic cohort, and that's pretty good news overall.
Before you change, there's a question regarding this slide.
Sure.
It just occurred to me that we don't really show, though, if a student, students that get a 1 or a 2 are below the standard. Students that get a 3 or a 4 have met the standard. But we don't have a depiction there of students who rose from 1 to 2, or students who rose from 3 to 4, or went from 4 to 3, or went from 2 to 1. Do you have that information, and could trustees please receive it?
I don't have that right now, but it's very easy to get. We can look at that, and we've often talked about, do we need to move our level 3 learners to level 4, that kind of thing. We can do a little bit of digging. That data is absolutely available. I just don't have it off the top of my head. So if trustees would like that, we can try to dig into that.
Because I think that would also help us to see where we're succeeding and perhaps where we need to work a little bit harder.
Sure. Yeah, that comes straight from EQAO, so we can get that out. This is our applied cohort graph. Looks quite different. Again, blue is good and green and turquoise are not so good. If we look at value added here, we see that 39% of that cohort from grade 6 was below standard and rose to standard with a 3% drop. So this is a 36% value added. So when we looked at those applied results on the earlier graph, remember they were much lower, kind of concerning, but we can see that we've made a significant difference. The kids, this particular group of kids from grade 6 to 9, we have seen substantial growth. So these are kids that tend not to be really strong in mathematics, but we've seen some growth there, which is substantial growth, which is really good news. Having said that, we've still got 41% that are not at the standard, and so that's the concern. We can dig a little bit deeper into that applied cohort of students, and we see that there's significant special education needs there, so that's something that we continue to look at. And that brings to mind the question, are we providing the right kinds of accommodations for kids with IEPs? And that growth has been pretty consistent from year to year, leveling off just a little bit this year, but fairly substantial, with over half of our kids having IEPs in that particular cohort. One of the other, do we want to do, Madam Chair, do we want, after? Okay. On the EQAO assessment, we do have survey data, and this gives us a sense of how kids are feeling about mathematics, whether they feel they're good at math, they're good at challenging problems, those kinds of things. This is the academic data, which is fairly good news overall. Is it on this slide, Trustee Ann Harvey? Sure.
This is reminding me of my applied critical thinking class in university. I like math, 62%, but I do my best in mathematics class, 89%. So do you have an understanding of what I do my best in mathematics class, what they mean when they say yes? It doesn't make any sense to me. Why anybody would say they don't like math, but they do their best in mathematics class. I don't know if that means they try hard or that's their best class or, you know, like, and if that's the case, is this coming from the EQAO people? And if so, we should tell them to switch their language.
This is coming from EQAO, and my interpretation would be, I love math. I love it. I love it, but maybe I don't feel that I'm very good at it. And I think that's okay. I mean, some kids may love math, but not feel that they're very good at it.
I'm just saying, is it 62% say I like math? So are they picking one of those four, or are they picking, or are they asking all of them? That's what I don't understand.
I understand the question. My apologies. They're asking 4 different questions there. So you can be, you can like math, you can feel that you're good at math, but you might say, I'm not able to answer hard questions. So there are 4 different questions that get 4 different responses.
It still doesn't make any sense why somebody who thinks they do their best in math doesn't like it. But
Director Miller.
Through you, Chair Amos, to Trustee Harvey Hope. I know on the surface it doesn't seem like it makes sense, but having been a former math teacher, I can tell you, many students feel that they are doing their absolute best and they're frustrated because they're not doing very well. And it is one of the great challenges that math teachers have and our program department is addressing through our applied strategy and so on. But it's not uncommon for math students to feel they're doing their best work and it's just not coming off for them. And I understand this. I think these are the EQAO questions. And we need to take a look at these results and combine them with some of our Tell Them From Me results as well and dig deeper. But I understand your confusion around it. But like I say, and Superintendent Bogue, I think, has also been a secondary math teacher as well. And we've seen that firsthand where students, and that actually creates other problems because their frustration levels grow. So.
follow-up? I understand what Director Miller just said, that you can be doing your best and you get frustrated. What I'm saying is that I don't understand when it says I do my best. It's not grammatically very well put together. As far as I'm trying my best would be fine, or, you know, I try is like, that's what I'm saying is I don't know whether you're going to get the right answer if you don't ask the right question.
No, I get it. I get it. I get it now. That's a fair point.
But that's just like all EQAO. Sorry, did I say that?
Well, you know, and it just goes to when you do a survey, the words that you use, yeah, can be interpreted. Thanks for that suggestion. We'll share that with EQAO.
Vice Chair Collard.
Yeah, I was going to just make the exact same point. I took myself off the list and then put myself back on because you said that the way you would interpret it would be the way that Director Miller interpreted it, which is also how I would interpret it. However, the interpretation is subjective, and we don't really know how the student is interpreting the question. And so, yes, the phrasing of that question is very poorly done if what they're trying to get at is the student doing their best effort in mathematics. That's what they're really trying to find out. Is this your best effort? Or, you know, maybe that's not what they're trying to find out. Maybe they're trying to find out something else. The question is so poorly worded that it doesn't make sense.
And we can share that back with EQAO. If they haven't heard that before, they are receptive to feedback, so we'll do that.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yep. No, thanks for that. This is the applied data, which looks quite different, and that sort of leads us to start thinking about how students are feeling about math and that positive image around mathematics and that sort of thing. Growth mindset. So this is really useful data in terms of how kids are perceiving math, and maybe that's having an impact on how they are achieving in math. Now I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to talk about some of the applied strategy in mathematics and some of the things that we're doing to address some of the gaps and some of the areas of growth for us.
Thank you. So this year we have all of our secondary schools that are part of the applied strategy, which means we are working with all of the teachers that are teaching currently and will be teaching the grade 9 and 10 applied courses. In those schools, we also have a fairly large in-school and board coaching program. So we've targeted 8 schools with an in-school coach who works directly with teachers and gets into the classroom at the student level, supporting what's going on in the classroom with some co-learning and co-planning of various instructional strategies for the purpose of student achievement. Our system coach, we have one board coach, and she is currently working in 3 of our schools. Those 3 schools do not have in-school math coaches, so we are able to support 11 schools with our coaching program. The targets for each of those schools, or the area of interest in those schools, depends on the student need. So I know Phil will speak a little bit differently about the literacy coaching program. With the math coaching program, it's very specific to each school based on their student need. We have a number of professional learning sessions for each of our in-school coaches. They come together. We do some learning as a group and support what's happening back in their schools when they return to their schools following those sessions. And we meet about once a month with those coaches for those learning sessions. We have some gap closing resources and professional learning, certainly for all of our teachers, those that are being coached and those that do not have access to a coach regularly. We also have professional learning sessions that are being put out for all of our applied teachers through some math institutes that will get put out, hopefully semester 1 now that sanctions are lifted, and certainly in more, there will be additional sessions semester 2. We are working on some applied classroom collaborative inquiries. So in a lot of our schools, we have single section applied courses. So getting teachers to work with whether it's a grade 9 to 10 applied courses, whether it's cross various subject areas and even cross schools, to provide teachers with the support of one another to do some co-learning in those collaborative inquiries, specifically addressing the needs of the students in their applied classes. We have our transition programs through LEAP and also our locally developed 1L and 2L courses, so our grade 9 and 10 locally developed courses. We are supporting them with what began as a resource, a Leaps and Bounds resource that was given to the teachers of those programs, and then that resource has been supported through an inquiry process that provides the teachers with support of one another, as well as a better understanding of how to use that resource and how to get it to the students to identify the gaps and the areas of need, and to begin to close those gaps for some of our students that are most at risk. We have a middle years collaborative inquiry, which is a program that we work with grade 7 to 10 teachers, so it's a cross-panel inquiry that provides teachers the opportunity to get into classrooms that are not in their panel. So our secondary teachers get into the 7-8 classes and vice versa. And that provides some additional learning for teachers in terms of strategies that they may not see in their own panel. It provides them with additional opportunities. It also allows them to have a better understanding of where students are coming from. The language can be similar to support the learning as the students move into grade 9 and 10. Certainly our secondary administrators, they are invited to all of our collaborative inquiries and additional learning that may come from those, in particular with the applied courses and applied inquiries that are currently running. And we have some intentional staffing for our grade 9 applied courses, working to put some of our more experienced teachers, some of teachers with a bit more consistency so that our courses are being developed and the learning that's happening every time a course is taken through to learn from that and continue to build on that program.
Thanks, Nicole. And that intentional staffing is really important. We've seen some huge success where we've had a really strong teacher who's done the program 2 and 3 times, can anticipate where kids are going to struggle. It makes all the world of difference. And so I think our principals are now on board, and we've got our star teachers in grade 9 in particular, and some more consistency from year to year. Moving into the Ontario Secondary School Literacy Test, we have great participation rates in Halton, very near to 100. So that's the kids that are participating. This graph is not about achievement, it's participation. A very, very small number of kids that either don't show up to write the test or are deferred for some very specific reasons, typically things that might be health related, where the school and parents both agree that it would not be a benefit to write the assessment. Our data on the OSSLT, very strong, around 90%, fairly level, and above the provincial data. This bar graph is the same as the line graph. It's really showing that we're consistent. This is all of our kids writing the Ontario Secondary School Literacy Test. Again, right in and around the 88 to 90 range. We showed this in bar form so that we can break this data down into the academic. Kids doing grade 10 academic English, or generally in the academic courses, and unusually high. This is great, great news. But we see the difference here now when we look at the students in the grade 10 applied English course. So similar kinds of results as we're seeing in grade 9 applied math. Obviously, we've got to focus on our applied level, or our applied learners in grade 10. If we break the data down by the subpopulations, again, the red represents all students. We see girls are outperforming the boys a little bit on the OSSLT. They're green, the green line above the red line. We see our boys are lagging a little bit below. Not a huge gap there, but there is a little bit of a gap. The black line representing our English language learners on the steady rise. So that's great news. And we see our students with special education needs are lagging. So there's an achievement gap and a need for us as a system to address our students with special education needs. Again, we look at the cohort sizes there, and it gives you a sense of the numbers of students with that are represented by each of those lines. Here's our value added, value subtracted graphs, and ours are value added in our board. If we look at reading, the literacy test is divided into 2 components, reading and writing. If we look at reading, we had 10% of our students from grade 6 that rose to the standard, and we had 4% that dropped. The other ones remained unchanged. So we see a 6% value added here for reading. And if we look at the writing component, 13% rose to standard and 5% dropped. So we see an 8% value added for the writing component of the assessment. And we'll turn things over to Mr. Davison to talk about literacy strategies.
As Nicole said, we have all our schools taking part in the applied strategy on the literacy side as well as on the numeracy side. The literacy coaches, and I should be clear, the literacy coaches are collaborating with teachers. The coaching that's happening is coaching of teachers, and it's collaborative learning. The teachers working to discover what does really effective literacy instruction look like in high school context. So they're working together to figure that out. And as you saw, it's a thorny problem for us in our applied classes. The SRI reading strategy is something that we've just started experimenting with the last 18 months. And SRI is Scholastic Reading Inventory. It's an online reading assessment. And it's just one reading assessment. What we're discovering is that it is a useful tool to establish a reading level as a starting place, but it's just one tool. And it doesn't doesn't really fully diagnose, if you will, what we need to do to provide the appropriate support for all kids, but it does help us to begin the process. So when we talk about it, we compare it to, you take your blood pressure, you measure your heart rate, you take a temperature, you do a lot of things to gather a full sense of someone's health. Well, this is one tool to get a sense of an aspect of a student's reading ability. And so the literacy coaches and their colleagues are starting to figure out what do we do with this information, and will it help us to provide better instruction to our students, especially in applied. And that really informs most of the rest of this work. We're really focusing on reading instruction in the secondary work this year to see if we can't make some progress. So professional learning sessions with all the applied teachers, with the essential English teachers as well. Pushes. Those are the collaborative inquiries. That's what the teachers of the LEAP program are working on as well. The subject council, so the grouping of all of the English department heads, among our work will be reflecting on this and thinking about sharing best practices between the schools. We try to work with the secondary administrators. That's always a challenge, but they're coming around, and we're working hard to keep the focus on, as Nicole said, putting the best teachers with the best skills into those applied classrooms. And finally, I'd say, as far as the literacy test goes, I believe that we're doing a very solid job of preparing kids who have the skills in place to be successful on the test. It's not a test that I would ever praise an applied English teacher for delivering. It's just not the right kind of test for an applied classroom, or at all for an essential classroom. And yet we work hard to have kids at least feel positive about their experience of the test. The academic kids do great, and they are continuing to do great. So I think we've figured out how to prepare kids who have the skills in place to be successful. Now we have to figure out how to improve the skills for those kids who don't have those skills in place.
Can I ask a question on that point? Are the applied and academic literacy tests the same?
Yes, so unlike the math EQAO, the grade 10 literacy test, it's a high stakes test. It's a graduation requirement, and it's one test is meant to fit all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil, for sharing that. And that's really all we've got for folks today. We're happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to answer anything around the data, and Nicole or Phil can certainly add some further perspective on what we're doing out there in schools.
Director Miller has a comment or question.
Oh, just a comment. For the benefit of the trustees, with the presentation that you've seen is slightly different than what we've done in the past. Normally, we've had the research department present the data. We felt it was important that we bring program people here to discuss what we're doing about the data, hence Nicole and Phil being here, so that you could ask. I know in the past we've asked questions of research, and when I was presenting it up there, and often we didn't really know the answers. So we thought, since we have the experts here in the room, that's why we've done it this way. So thanks.
Is there any other comments or questions for our presenters tonight? If not, I have one. The grade 9 math test there's a different test for academic and applied, but is the applied a true applied test, or is it a blended academic applied test? Like, my concern is it really measuring those applied students, or is it creating a false result because it's not actually the level of what our applied students are actually doing within class, and they may be doing better within the course structure, but not for the test?
So the applied EQAO exam or test is based on the applied curriculum. The setup is exactly the same as the academic. So the multiple choice questions, and then they have short answer questions, and then more multiple choice. So in terms of the setup of the exam or the test, it's the same. There's no adjustment in that sense. However, obviously the content comes directly from the applied curriculum. I would suggest that many of our teachers in our grade 9 applied classes are structuring their classes in very different ways and in ways that are supporting the needs of the kids in their room. And so that would mean less traditional testing methods. So part of the preparation for our grade 9 students in applied courses is to prepare them for writing a multiple choice test and to prepare them for some of the strategies that they're going to need to do that, because it's not typically the way they're going to learn best and to demonstrate their understanding and that would best suit them.
So none of these tests really take into account differentiated learning or the other testing procedures that we are trying to embrace as a system, because that is the way students learn. This is a much more regimented way for both the math and literacy tests. Correct?
You're absolutely right. I mean, for applied students, we talk about applied learners, and they're hands-on, they're tactile, they're real-life kind of application, practical, and yet this assessment, both of them are very academic assessments. And so that match for the learning style of kids in applied is a bit of a concern. And I think EQAO was aware of that. I'm not sure whether there's anything that they're able to do about that, but that you've hit it on the head.
And my other concern is we're teaching to the tests. I know we were doing that in grade 3 and 6, and I believe that's still the case. And obviously we're doing it for grade 9 and 10 so that students can succeed. And to me, that causes some great difficulties because, again, we're not differentiating, we're not allowing for the way students learn. And while I understand it's important to have a benchmark and data that we can collect for all these students, I'm just not sure that this is the right way. We have some other questions. Sorry. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you. And I was just going to build on that point. And if we are providing feedback around the earlier comment made by Trustee Harvey Hope, perhaps we can offer that feedback as well. And similarly, it may be influencing the spec ed results in terms of the way that those tests are delivered, the standardized methods when some people learn in a whole bunch of ways. So I think that's a really important point.
Thank you, Trustee Graves.
Through you, Chair, to Superintendent Boat and staff, I just wanted to thank you for this detailed level of report. And what was really telling for me, and what I like to see the most, is to see the number who rose to standard. I think in every single case is greater than those who dropped from standard. So overall, net, we're providing more and more value added for students overall. So I think it's a great news story. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Schneider.
Through you, Chair. I know EQAO is transitioning over to online testing in the upcoming years. So how do you think that will affect the data and how classrooms teach kids how to do math on a computer and be successful in the same way?
Yes, it's going to be a challenge. The plans are delayed. Originally, the plan was to move to a online test this year, but that's been postponed. We don't know when the literacy test will move online, but it'll be at least a year from now. The feedback we had from students when they were taking practice tests online last year that didn't count was that it was very mixed. Some really liked it and they found it a more comfortable way. The interesting thing was their teachers tended to be very, very critical of it, but I think the students have better vision than most of their teachers. The kids did not react to the small screen nearly as much as the teachers who were supervising it did. But some students didn't like it. Now, we're told that even when it does go ahead, students will have the option of using a paper version. Whether those students will have to be identified students or not, we don't know. The math is going to be even more complex. Obviously, without a tablet, it's pretty tricky to demonstrate some of your mathematical knowledge. But I don't think there's been any talk, so that's a few years away.
Could we see like using the technology not specifically for EQAO, but in grade 9, like the start of preparing by testing using technology just in traditional classrooms?
Yeah, certainly as part of our applied strategy, we have been purchasing quite a few Chromebooks and dedicated them to applied classrooms, where we've been saying that these classrooms are our priority. We want them to be the best equipped rooms in the building, and make sure that those students have frequent access, daily access, so that reading online is a very normal part of their day. And I think that's a first step. We don't know, and to the point of teaching to the test, I don't want to turn grade 9 and 10 applied English classes into courses in test preparation for all the reasons that you've heard. But I do want students to feel that they have a fair shot and can be successful on this test. So it's a balance.
Thank you. Trustee Gray.
Thank you. I'm just sitting here reflecting on some of the comments made by my fellow trustees here tonight about the fact that we know that we have learners with different styles, and we know of great movements that have been made in years just recent on the assessment of and for learning, and yet we force through the EQAO our students into this box that's sort of non-conforming to what we know of them as learners and what we know of effective assessment practices. Are you aware of any reforms underway in the EQAO offices to address some of these things? And the second question I had was, is there any data available for those who were writing the OSSLT for the second time?
Maybe I can answer the first part, and I'll turn it over to Phil for the second part. We provide EQAO with feedback on a pretty regular basis. We sometimes do it from a board perspective, but often we do it through our ministry contacts. I'll give you an example of something else that we learned doing the pilot online OSSLT is students with special education needs were forced to sort of comply with the technology piece that the ministry wanted us to use. So a student that was using a particular different kind of device like an iPad wasn't able to use their iPad because there's all kinds of security issues around loading the test onto technology, those kinds of things. So we've provided them with lots of feedback. We've provided them with feedback around the whole online environment as well. We're a pretty well-equipped board in terms of bandwidth and all that sort of thing. So I think some of the other boards that are behind have caused this delay. In terms of the pedagogy of the assessment, that kind of thing, that is feedback that we provide to them as well. I'm not sure, we can push and push and push, but EQAO is, I'm not sure how much influence we're having, quite honestly. Do you want to comment on the
previously eligible?
Yeah.
Again, I think it's a good news story. About 70% of students who are writing it for the second time were successful. I'm not aware of any student in Halton who has not been able to graduate because of the literacy requirement. We get our kids through. We follow up. Schools do an excellent job of tracking and supporting kids. There are other avenues to demonstrate their literacy. The literacy course is probably more appropriate way for students who are not test takers and aren't ever going to be test takers. So we get kids through that way, and then there's a final chance for students in a adjudication that every year 1 or 2 kids comes down to that, but we get kids through.
Thank you. I personally have always had concerns about EQAO because I think it's apples to oranges, and while it's a good tracking mechanism, it's not necessarily a fair one. And I also have concerns about the way it's marked because I know for the literacy test, if you go beyond the actual number of lines or you don't go to script, then you lose marks and things like that. So anyways, thank you very much for your presentation. It is good news for us as a system. There is some improvement, and the strategies that are being put in place to help support the students that need more support is really good news. And thank you for all your efforts on their behalf. And thank you for coming out tonight. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Nicole. And thank you, Superintendent Bogue. Our next items are committee reports. Do we have any committee reports tonight? Trustee Daniele.
Thank you. Two committee reports for you. I just want the Equity and Inclusive Education Committee met. It was phenomenal. I don't know if it was spoken to last week. Did you speak to the hiring practices? Okay, one of the reports that we heard is what the Human Resources Department is doing in terms of creating a more diverse atmosphere at the board, and some of the work that they're doing. I'd love to see a presentation or a report on it at some point to make trustees aware of creating more equitable hiring practices and reaching out to more diverse communities was absolutely fascinating. So I wanted to share that with you, and perhaps we can get more information on that out to you, because it was a really, really interesting presentation. And I also just wanted to say that the PIC organizing committee met last night, and trustees Grabantz and Amos were there as well. And by all consensus, the PIC conference was a success. And the committee itself was a success. We created some new roles, and yeah, I'm looking at you. Trustee Grabantz is going to be taking over communications and marketing. So I think it's going to be bigger and better next year. It's a really good committee with more people joining. And again, a reminder that on the 19th, all the PIC reps from all of your schools will be here. So that's why trustees are being encouraged to attend the meeting on November 19th, because we'll be grouped by school, so it's a really good opportunity to spend time and get to know the PIC reps from your schools as well. And I think that's me done.
Thank you. Vice Chair Collard.
Just a brief report on the OPSPA regional meeting from last Saturday, attended by Trustee Gray and myself. It was a wonderful day of learning. We had a full morning of professional development, which was very well received by the entire room. I think there was over 40 people there. It was really well attended. And then in the afternoon, we had our regional meetings, and you've all received a copy of the minutes of those. And they have been amended as per the eagle eyes of Trustee L. Harrison, who noted that there was a comment that was perhaps not reflective of what we are doing here with our program viability report. So that was a great day and a good success, I think, for OPSPA and for our region. And I attended the Pathways Conference with Trustee Daniele yesterday morning. I had ministry initiatives and report from our perennial favorite, although Cianfrini, I never say his last name properly, and I know that my Italian counterpart will correct me. So it was an excellent day of learning for our staff, and they got their pathways, programs, and schisms all up and running and on the way for our students this year, which was good. And then again last night at SEAC, we had a really rich conversation about some of our processes, including the IEP process, the SRT process, and a good discussion around Schedule 6 of the standards for the special education plan. And I think we actually ended on, well, not on time, but pretty close to on time last night. I think it was about 10 to 10 we got out, so it wasn't too late of an evening, comparatively speaking. And again, it was a good conversation and a lot accomplished.
Thank you. Trustee Graves.
Regarding policy, bylaws, and governance, as you know, we're working our way through our bylaws. Next week we'll have a preliminary discussion on committee structure, and we're also doing a more in-depth discussion on delegations. So trustees, please look for something I'll be sending out and asking for feedback, which we'll review at that meeting to help move things along. Yesterday, I was forwarded some documents from Senior Manager Dominic Ranzella regarding program and accommodation review, policies and documents. He's requested some time at policy, bylaws, and governance to discuss. So I thought that was going to mess up the agenda. However, unless someone corrects me if I'm wrong, I think we have the full 3 hours next week for PB&G, in which case I am just going to add that as an item and everything else will stay status quo. So I think we can get a lot of great work done. So you have all of those documents. I just forwarded them to you this evening, and you can review before the committee meeting next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Pappen.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that our first meeting of the Accessibility Coordinating Committee will take place on November the 19th here from 9 to 11. And I'd also like to welcome our newest member, Superintendent Etoff, as part of our committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other committee reports tonight? Trustee Daniele.
Thank you. When I spoke about equity inclusion, I completely forgot to mention that we do have the Welcome Center opening this Saturday at the Welcome Center in Milton. Doors open at 12 o'clock. The presentation is at 12:30, and all are welcome. And just a quick addendum to Vice Chair Collard's report from yesterday, Pathways. One of the things that I think that was absolutely exceptional we found at that meeting is that Halton is exceeding the province in almost every area in terms of its SHISM programs. So that was really fantastic news to hear when we looked at the data.
That's great. Okay. Is there any others? Seeing none, we're now up to the director's report.
Thank you, Chair Amos. To all trustees, Trustee Daniele has mentioned one of the things I was going to mention. That was the Welcome Center. That's okay. Hope to see you all there. A couple of other things. The information sessions for the Program Viability Committee, the last one on the information session. So phase one is not quite complete. There will be a presentation for SEAC and the Student Senate as well. The SEAC presentation will be at the next SEAC meeting. We've had, the attendance was, I think, well attended at these meetings. See that? It's tough because I got to process it in my head to do it. It's not easy. It's not easy being me, I'll tell you. We had approximately 400 to 500 parents at the sessions. We've had several questions. We will be posting the questions and answers to those questions on the site, on our website. By and large, I thought the spirit of the information sessions were as we had intended. Parents came to hear what the information was, to hear what they were about, and by and large, the questions we received were ones of clarification around information. We will now sit down and start, well, we've already started, but finalizing the organization arrangement for phase two, which will be feedback consultation phase, which we anticipate will start very shortly. Also, next week we have the Halton Learning Foundation dinner, and just, I know I've told trustees this before, but just for public consumption, the ad, sadly, for Executive Officer of Human Resources has gone out and closes November 15th, and I say sadly because that means the acting Executive Officer of Human Resources will soon be coming to a close. So, but not yet. We've done them for a wee while yet. So,
the curtain closes.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all I have to report.
Thank you. Well, all the things are coming off my list because everybody's already been mentioned, though, which is great. You can wait for trustee comments and questions. Trustee Gravance.
Just about the viability, I've had a few questions about when information is going to be posted onto the website for parents. Meaning the information night, you know, like a video.
Through your chair, Amos, to Trustee Grabentz, the actual presentations I have done, or we have done, are posted already. The PowerPoint that we use should be posted, plus some of the other data. I noticed that, in speaking to Senior Manager Ranzella last evening, there was a problem with that. That should be fixed. It may have been fixed already today, but if not, before the end of the week. And also the Q&As that we had from the community, those will be posted before the end of the week. So.
Thank you. So communications from the chair, you've already heard about the Welcome Center. Hope everybody has an opportunity to come out. And the Halton Learning Foundation Gala, which is next Thursday. And I don't believe I have anything else. So we're coming up to trustee comments and questions. And because I have one, I'm just going to keep going. It's been raised that there's a concern about the wait list time for students who are waiting for psych ed assessments and speech assessments. And I just wondered, Director Miller, if we know what the status is of those lists right now.
I will defer to Superintendent Zonneveld.
Thank you. Superintendent Zonneveld.
Thank you. Through the chair to the chair. Yes, thanks, and thanks for sharing this question in advance, because I was able to consult with staff and get a bit of an update. This is something that we monitor quite closely, keeping in mind that we assign our staff to be able to manage our referrals and assessments that are required throughout the system, and try and keep those lists to a regular manageable amount as we go forward. However, what we can't account for is the number of referrals that will come forward from each school. So a school could have five requests for assessments one year and 15 the next, as an example. So that that variation then can change the workload for staff, and as a result, the wait list times can fluctuate school to school. So currently, I asked for average wait times by area. I thought was enough of a breakdown. And so to share those in our central area, which is the south portion of Milton, East Burlington, and West Oakville. We have 4 areas in student services that we provide support in. So in the central area, our wait time is about 8 months. That's our average. In East Oakville, the East area, which is the rest of Oakville, it's about 8 months. In our north area, which is the remainder of Milton, Acton, Georgetown, that wait time is the average wait time is about a year. And in the west area, which is the rest of Burlington, once again about a year. So our goal is to keep those wait times under a year. It's what we strive for. And so when we have, you're hearing a bit of an imbalance between 8 and 12 months here. And so then as a staff, we respond by having staff within those areas and in other areas shift some of their workload to catch up in those areas where the wait lists are longer. Some schools in some of those areas would have even longer times and some even shorter. So once again, that shifting goes on. And there's a few other, so that's some of our normal process that happens. Also, we do some catch up in the summer. So for example, we had a longer wait time, a bit of a backlog in the north area last year. And so we did about 60 assessments during the summer, just in the north. We focused our dollars in the north to get caught up there. So that's one of our strategies that we do. Also, So, that's right. I'll point out a few challenges. One is that we have consistently had difficulty in hiring staff. And so, for example, we had a number of months of unfilled vacancies last year that we try to keep our bar pretty high in terms of hiring those staff, and so we really struggled with that. We were eventually able to fill them, and we have a full complement right now. However, we have 2 mat leaves coming up. So, however, although we appreciate staff continuing to give us business in terms of those mat leaves, we, at the same time, I know that for these 2 postings, I think we only had 3 applicants. And 2 of them were considering, one, maybe a for sure hire. That's just part of that challenge. It's not just in Halton, it's a province-wide issue. So that adds to some of our challenge in that we will have a vacancy and therefore the need for staff to try and pick up on those. So that's and then finally we've had I believe I shared with trustees in the last spring that we were doing some staff reassignments that would allow us to create more of a wraparound service model with our schools. And in that process of some of the shifting, we need to sort of write some of the numbers because some staff picked up other schools and that added to some of their workload. So we've once again need to do some balancing. So all that is in process. And so, where we've talked about, and I know of some schools that have longer wait times, we are certainly doing all those things in an effort to address that and bring them down, because our goal is to keep them under a year. And maybe if I could add one more thing, this was a topic at SEAC as well last night. We had some good discussion around this. SEAC would like to chew on this a bit more, so we will be having some more dialogue there. And we also, this came up because the language in our spec ed plan we identified doesn't give parents a really accurate picture of that. So we've wrestled with the kinds of wording there to try and make sure that when parents are reading our plan have a good picture. So that we're going to make sure that as well.
Thank you. I think that gives us a better idea of the status. And I know we do want to keep it below a year, and it's a concern that some schools may be over that. I know in the past we've looked at outside agencies to help us, and I don't know if that's an option that's worth exploring at this time. I know that's more dollars, so that's a problem. The other piece is to make sure that messaging at schools, that it's an accurate message about the wait times, and how that's presented to parents, because I have a bit of a concern if the message isn't being realistic.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for that information. Are there any other trustees' questions or comments tonight? Trustee Gerbentz.
Okay, so I just have some school-type news. I like to brag. So about our schools. So M.M. Robinson was recognized by the Terry Fox Foundation for 20 years of support from the school, and they received a banner from the foundation in a school-wide ceremony. Dr. Frank J. Hayden's social justiceism did a Habitat for Humanity build in Milton. And the club is participating in the We Scare Hunger campaign in concert with Zach's Gift of Giving campaign. And just on a side note, Ward 3 and 6, we had in Burlington had a super council meeting last week, and we had quite a fulsome discussion on ideas for trying to increase the size of school councils, getting more volunteers and community involvement. So anybody who's watching, get involved with your school.
Thank you so much. Trustee Schneider.
Yesterday, I was able to attend DECA regionals, and for those of you who don't know what DECA is, it's a business competition. And it's international an international competition. There are regionals, provincials, and internationals. And I got involved in this about last year, and now I'm part of the executive of my chapter at my school. But at regionals, which was in Hamilton yesterday, during the awards ceremony, or a number of Halton schools were there, and during the awards ceremonies, a lot of Halton schools won awards. So it was very cool to hear. I don't want to name every school that was there, but the schools I heard a lot in the awards were Garth Webb, who only established their chapter 3 years ago by one of our student senators, actually. I actually saw a bunch of student senators there, which was cool. WAS won a lot. They have an established chapter there. They had the most, I think they had the most students from a public school for number of students.
They have 120 in their decade.
Yeah. That they had the most public school students there from a chapter, and my school, Abbey Park, we won a number of things. Iroquois won a number of things. I heard Robert Bateman win a number of things. There are more schools. Yeah, Georgetown, a lot of Halton schools were there and did really well, showed very well for Halton District. And it was among private schools too. It's the Hamilton Regionals are private schools, all private schools in Ontario, and the public schools in the Hamilton region. So it was very nice to see.
Sophie, would you like to explain what DECA is? Because I don't believe that all trustees will know.
Okay, so DECA is a business competition, and basically there's two portions or two kinds of things that you can do. You can do a written event, which is making some sort of business plan, and then there's a role play. So at regionals, it's only role play. So basically, there's different categories, and you get a situation, and depending on your event, you get, if you're in a team or not, you get a limited amount of time to make a solution to that problem, to the case, and there's a number of indicators that you have to achieve, and you get marked by an examiner, and then you also write an exam about, it's multiple choice, 100 questions about your business knowledge, and then those scores are averaged out, and then there's a number of ranking and awards and qualifications to provincials, which are in Toronto in later in the year, second semester, and then ICDC, which is the internationals, where you get to compete with people all around the world. Yeah.
Thank you. It's very exciting. Great for Halton. Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. I'm delighted to report that Aldershot High School had their Spoons Homecoming concert, and the efforts were to raise funds for the auditorium renewal. Over $12,000 was raised in that one night. Delighted to know that actually both bands that were playing, the Spoons of course coming from Aldershot, but Beautiful Nothing, I found out were from Burlington Central. So it was a really local homecoming. Thank you to Trustee Pappen who came out, all the trustees who tweeted it, all the staff who put posters up. They were well covered. We think that that promotion really helped raise awareness and got people out, and even seats were bought. The second comment I have is in the west end of Aldershot, they produce a local newspaper partnering Aldershot Press. And I just found out today at our partnering Aldershot meeting that the new editor will be Judith Jennis, who happens to be a Halton District School Board teacher at Pearson. So delighted to see what she reports. Thanks.
Thank you. Vice Chair Collard.
Yes, I guess about 18 months ago, trustees approved funding for the new technology in this boardroom so that we could have electronic voting and electronic attendance at our meetings. And part of that initiative was to be able to use this room for our SEAC meetings, use the technology there, as well as for other types of meetings such as PIC, so that anybody could have a login and use the technology for voting, and that we could podcast and video voice record all of these meetings for public consumption, because they are public meetings, and yet if people aren't in the room, they don't get to see what's happening. And I've noticed over the last few months that we still haven't rolled it out to our other public meetings, and I would just like to remind staff that that was part of the plan. And I know that we don't necessarily have to have somebody here to run the equipment for those meetings, that we could have the camera set just to be on a wide angle and leave it as that for the meeting, as long as the person running the meeting could run the, turning it on and turning it off. We would just really need logins for people. And so I was hoping that we could get going on that to just increase our community awareness of the meetings that are happening here.
Thank you. Superintendent Truffin.
Thank you. Through the chair of the trustees, that's certainly something we can investigate. However, I can tell you we have two individuals back there that, so for these meetings, we do require technicians to operate the hardware and software, the cameras, the projectors. So I would call it, I have some reservations on not having technicians here, because nothing would be more frustrating than thinking that you're committing to something and not having the technical support to operate. So it is, and Chris over there is the brains behind this system. He is working on transferring his knowledge to our TC techs, and Ryan's back there. So Trustee Collard, I do think we require technicians to do that, unless we train a trustee to be a technician, which is completely possible.
Vice Chair Collard.
It's just as a follow-up to that, our SEAC meetings always used to be video voice recorded for public consumption, and now, because of the way it's set up, we're no longer providing that to the public. And I'm very concerned, especially when it comes to SEAC, because of the needs of the special education community, that we're not having these meetings video voice recorded anymore. And I'm really, I would really want to see this happening again, so that people can access our meetings.
Thank you. Trustee Pappen.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of attending Nelson's Student Awards of Excellence in October. It was a very positive and enriching experience. I'd also like to share an idea that has become a reality at Sir Ernest Macmillan School. A member of the community, Jonathan Dan, wanted to try and erase the disappointment of kids not having anyone to play with. And so he built what's known as a buddy bench. There's an article that appeared in the Hamilton Spectator. This bench isn't quite as nice as the one we have. There was a really good picture in the Burlington Spectator, but it was a very good idea, and he'd like to extend it to other public schools in the area. I also had the opportunity of attending the Spoons concert. That concert came out of a book signing by Gordon Deppy, which one of the members of the committee also attended and asked if he would come to the school and perform this benefit concert. So I bought two of the books, and I did read it. They were actually Christmas presents for two of my brothers, but hopefully they're not watching. Anyway, I did write a book review on the book for Pause and Read, which is now on the library website. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee L. Harrison.
Hello, thank you. Just a couple things. Oakwood Public School, under new principal Vince Kandari, has been doing a lot of really exciting things in that community. We had, I was lucky to attend, and I learned how to play bocce ball last Sunday, which was pretty exciting. And they're having weekly Footloose Fridays. So the students, teachers, families are all invited before school to come and go for a community walk together. So that was great. Last Friday I got to see all of the student Halloween costumes. So it was frightful but fun. Blakelock tomorrow, TA Blakelock, our secondary school, is having a concert and hosting a conductor and some other schools to come in. So they have some super talented student musicians, and I look forward to hearing their music tomorrow. And lastly, I just wanted to thank Chair Amos for starting our meeting with a recognition that we're on traditional lands, and that was great, and thank you for doing that. I think that's a first for us.
Yeah. You're more than welcome. Trustee Gray.
Just like my colleague trustees, it seems to be the month to be acknowledging awards of excellence, kinds of celebrations, and such occurred up in Georgetown recently. So I had the pleasure to attend that and participate in the award presentations to those students. Just 2 weeks earlier, I also had the pleasure of attending the commencement ceremonies, and I know Superintendent Podger-Barrick on that same evening attended the commencement ceremonies for Acton District High School. So some wonderful positive events happening just as my fellow colleagues are reporting tonight. So that's the report from Halton Hills.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers, can I have a motion to rise into private? Trustee Gerbent, seconded by Trustee Gray. Just a minute. All those in favor? Next topic. Set, yep. Okay, you can go ahead. Angel Van's gone. Okay. Thank you. That passes unanimously. We will reconvene in 5 minutes. Thank you very much.